Greetings to Beneros. The justification for spreading Western power throughout the world is, of course, to do good. NATO troops scour the ridges of Afghanistan, plow the sands of Mesopotamia, dig into the valleys of the Balkans only to bring freedom, prosperity, and justice to all. We're told we'd be better off to get used to it because, in the words of Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. The so-called Tina Doctrine, which she was so fond of pulling out of her purse and whacking over the head of the British public. Of course, you don't expect she came up with that phrase all by herself, did you? She swiped it from Herbert Spencer, the 19th century British philosopher who popularized Darwin's social biology. It was Spencer, not Darwin, who also coined the concept survival of the fittest in 1864. By this term, he meant that human society must allow its weakest links to break off and die to further the chain of human development. Spencer's utilitarian standard of ultimate value, the greatest happiness of the greatest number, is also the basis of modern libertarianism, as well as its economic offshoots in the theories of Hayek and von Mises. To Spencer, the culmination of the evolutionary process means the maximization of utility. In the perfect society, individuals would not only derive pleasure from doing good, positive beneficence, but would aim to avoid inflicting pain on others, negative beneficence. They would also instinctively respect the rights of others, leading to the universal observance of the principle of justice, that each person had the right to a maximum amount of liberty that was compatible with a like liberty in others. Liberty being interpreted as the absence of coercion and closely connected to the right to private property. Spencer termed this code of conduct absolute ethics, which provided a scientifically grounded moral system that could substitute for the supernaturally based ethical systems of the past. However, he recognized that our inherited moral order doesn't currently permit us to behave in full accord with the code of absolute ethics, and for this reason we need a code of relative ethics, which takes into account our present imperfections, or as Marx would have put it, the transitional phase between present reality and the final phase of humanity. Although there is a strong humanism in this philosophy, it's hard to square with the mandates of social Darwinism's survival of the fittest doctrine that he espoused. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. What seems to tie it all up is that Spencer's philosophy is at heart conservative, that sees society progressing from an already established basis, private property, rather than searching for new bases. Social evolution was poised as the opposite of social revolution. The flaw there, of course, is that the human species is an example of natural revolution. The human being is sui generis in nature, leading to misplaced concepts of human divinity or divine intervention in the origin of the human species. To Spencer, the great naturalist, in spite of the evidence in the natural world looking him in the mirror every day, there is no revolution in nature. So, for evolution to produce this perfect individual in the libertarian society, the new man, as Marx would have called him, it's necessary for present and future generations to experience the natural consequences of existence. Only in this way would they have incentive to work on self-improvement and thereby transmit an improved moral as well as physical inheritance to their descendants. So anything that interferes with the natural relationship of conduct and consequence is to be resisted. This specifically includes using the power of the state to relieve poverty, to provide public education or public health, even down to compulsory vaccination. Although charity is acceptable, even that is to be limited, because suffering is frequently the result of individuals receiving the consequences of their actions. If that obese kid is dying from diabetes at 15, the fat little pig deserves it for being a glutton, and the parent seed deserves to die out just because they let him do it. This punishment does not, of course, extend to the junk food maker and the advertising agencies that conned the tubalard into consuming addictive foodstuffs and suppressed all evidence of its products' bad effects. That would be interfering with the right of trade and thus coercion. Thus, too much individual benevolence directed to the undeserving poor would break the link between conduct and consequence that Spencer considered fundamental to ensure humanity continued evolving to higher levels, and thus in turn applying the principles of Malthusian economy onto the natural world. Such 19th century rationalizations of class rule and war were finally discredited after World War II, when Germany took them to their final economic, social, and political conclusion under Hitler. Said Reichskanzler just made the mistake of applying them to Britain, France, and other deserving nations instead of confining them to the lesser breeds of the evolutionary chain. Spencer would deny any such evolutionary link between him and Hitler because the latter employed the state, and therefore revolution instead of evolution in enforcing his T4 social euthanasia program, whereby at least 200,000 physically or mentally handicapped people killed by medication starvation or in the gas chambers between 1939 and 1945, which of course is an example of socialized medicine. But that's all hair splitting. It makes no difference if these people are weeded out by starvation or outright murder. Consigning the so-called unfit to their deaths amounts to the same, no matter the method. The Nazis, in fact, thought they were being humane in depriving human life unworthy of the title from a continued existence of pain and despair, and gas, like the guillotine, was considered a more evolved way of enforcing nature's judgment. So, was this your roundabout way of calling Margaret Thatcher a Nazi? This is my way of saying that modern neoliberalism in economics and libertarianism in social philosophy is rooted in the same soil of power and privilege. That when Thatcher or Reagan, Uncle Milty Friedman, or Paul Ryan, with his 4-year plan, tells you there is no alternative to the rule of the West, meaning the free market and the force of NATO to protect it, that these are as irresistible as nature itself, they are projecting a totalitarian philosophy around the globe as destructive as anything those classic tyrants of the 20th century could have wished for. In this regard, Chancellor Angela Merkel is only continuing the work of her predecessor across Europe. Except, as in keeping with the philosophy of Herbert Spencer, they must starve for the good of humanity and their own good, rather than just putting them directly out of their imposed misery. Uh-oh. Who's this on the YouTube line? Hello. Lady Maggie, I had a feeling it'd be you. You want to tell our viewers that you're glad someone has grasped your torch and is applying it to Western civilization. You mean your fellow Frau, Chancellor Angela Merkel, pulling Tina and keeping the barbarian nations at bay. Yeah, she's rocking in the Reichstag, all right. So what if they don't call it that anymore? What's that? We're in a global lifeboat now, and whoever rocks that will get thrown off to the sharks to save those who deserve to survive. Spoken like Sir Neville Chamberlain, you're still the old Tory battle axe, Maggie. And it's still the Reichstag.